Well, the Red Sox make a trade to get a shortstop, a much-needed shortstop after the injury to Trevor Story. We're going to have a break it down all here on a bonus episode of the OK Baseball Podcast. Off-season season is continuing to fire up here in the last week of January. We are getting closer and closer to spring training, but the rosters obviously are not set. We get to talk about the Boston Red Sox today, a team that we feel like haven't talked about in good light so far this offseason. Maybe a little bit of light here coming at the end of the tunnel as we get towards them heading down to Florida for spring training. They go ahead and acquire Adalberto Mondesi from the Kansas City Royals in a trade. Heading over back to Kansas City is Josh Taylor. I think there's a lot to break down for this, but really the big thing is Mondesi is going to probably be the starting shortstop once the season starts. The Red Sox filling in, obviously, the loss of Xander Bogaerts and now the injury to Trevor Story. Sean, let's break this down. This is a pretty interesting trade. Jeff Passan broke this around noon Eastern today. A lot of people haven't got to it throughout the media. I feel like we're one of the first to get a podcast out. So there you go. You want some bonus episodes? Hit us up. Go ahead and hit that like, subscribe on YouTube, hit the follow button because we always have breaking news for you here at the OK Baseball Podcast. Sean, break this down for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually one of those deals where you look at it on paper and you're like, oh, okay. And I think, maybe the context of spring training being so close, I think it didn't feel like a big, exciting deal. But then when you actually start to look at it, this deal makes a whole lot of sense, particularly for the Boston Red Sox. So I think I like it. I think I like the deal, and maybe for both sides, but certainly more for the Boston Red Sox. I think they needed a solution at the shortstop. So, you could do a lot worse actually than Mondesi. So good for them.
Yeah, Mondesi's only 27 years old. I mean, at one point in time, we were talking this is the star level type of player. Kansas City was all in on this guy. And I believe, 2017, 18, maybe even 19. But it seems like ever since then, and even during those years as well, he was just plagued by injuries. We just saw him never really have a full season. He's also recovering from a torn ACL right now in his left knee. But he's healthy right now, and that's something that Boston absolutely needs after losing Bogaerts and dealing with the injury of good old rubber arm Trevor Story. So there's just a significant window, a significant gap, if you will, in the middle of the infield. Mondesi will be able to fill that just well. I mean, looking right off the bat, and then we'll dig into this as well, Fangraph's depth chart already has a significant increase in projected WAR for this infield, adding Mondesi into that lineup. We'll dig into that more here in just a little bit. I like this Mondesi pickup. I think this is a good addition for Boston. I think this is not a huge risk. You did give up Josh Taylor, who is also one of those guys that could have done well for your bullpen. He wasn't around in 2022. He missed all last season with a back injury. So it's basically a change of scenery for both players that just went off some injuries. Maybe that's a good thing. Who knows? It's definitely not a surplus for either side. Not like what we talked about in the past with the Marlins and the Twins trade. But this is something I think that could be a beneficial for both teams. But I do agree with you. I do like it better for Boston. Mondesi, I think, will fit good in Boston for them. And this is something they absolutely need because when we talked about AL East season preview, Sean, we had Boston in the basement and it wasn't even close. Now, I don't know if they're still not a playoff contention team. I don't think this really moves the needle for me, but this absolutely helps them on both offensive and defensive production.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think the key to remember is that, one player, particularly this player, is not going to all of a sudden turn around the season for the Boston Red Sox. They need a lot. They've got a lot of question marks. But what it does do is it kind of adds a different element to their offense. And, at Jays from the Couch, I've been actually just put up a post about kind of comparing division infields. I did the outfield previously, so I did the infield this time. And the Boston Red Sox actually are an interesting story in that their offense actually is middle of the division. It's not bad. It's not terrible. They've got a fairly good offense. And defensively speaking, they're good as well. What's interesting is that Mondesi moving now into the AL East away from the expansive Kauffman Stadium. He's tabbed by Steamer by 13 home runs, approaching 30 stolen bases. That's an element to the Red Sox lineup that they didn't necessarily have before. Now, obviously, he's still going to strike out. Like in 2022, we're at 37% strikeout rate, hit a $140, a weighted runs created plus. Christian, you never see this. It's so rare. But his weighted runs created plus, -3. So he's so far below league average with the bat in 2022. Obviously, he's projected to rebound a little bit, up to 84, just a tick above a win for next season. But the big thing that they're bringing him in for is obviously to fill that shortstop position. Just looking at StatCast last year, he put up four outs above average. So solidifying the defense and adding another element to their offense, it's tough to not like this deal if you're a Red Sox fan.
When you look at his career line, 244, 280, 408 with 31 home runs, 133 stolen bases. The stolen bases definitely stick out to me for sure. And when you think the projections of possible 30 stolen base guy in 2023, that's huge for Boston. But I do think he might have an opportunity to get a little bit more power, not having half of his games in Kauffman Stadium, like you mentioned, because that is just not a fun park to play, batter friendly, if you will. I could see his numbers being a little bit more improved. I don't think he's going to be a top of the lineup guy, though. I could totally see them putting him towards the bottom of the lineup and trying to be a good flip of the lineup guy, get some stolen bases, get in scoring position for the Boston's top of the lineup to run him in. I could totally see him in maybe the 8 or the 9 hole and be completely okay with that if I was a Boston fan.
Yeah, in fact, I think what we may even be, I can't help but wonder if we're going to see now more guys like Mondesi, their value just kind of goes up with the new rule changes and things like that are happening this coming season. Bigger bases. I don't know that they're not going to be, like 12 miles big, but they're increasing the size of the bases. They're, cutting down on the shift and things like that very well actually could play into the game of a Mondesi. So that I'll be interested to see. And maybe this is the start of something across baseball. The Red Sox are saying, you know what? Maybe we can just add this element to our game for this coming season, and maybe that'll make us that much more competitive than we already were, or push the needle, I guess, as you call it, to kind of, I don't know, improve the on-field product. Really, I think that's what it is, right? You just got one different way to do that, and so it's tough to see any really negative with that.
We already talked about the celebrities and the hot shots of the last 2 decades sitting at the shortstop position. I think you also add in second base now, and we're with you with the shift restrictions of being the next hot shot, the next big things. I do think that we are going to see a lot of franchises put a lot of their assets into building up both of those middle infielder spots, not just shortstop. I think that is something that's coming down the pipeline because of the shift restriction, because of those bigger bags. You got to be quicker for tags. It's going to be a lot easier to steal bases. We saw something just over with you with the Toronto Blue Jays. We saw a Fangraphs report a article out just last week about Bo Bichette and talking about how his stuff changed, and it was just about a millisecond, and it changed his stolen bases by about 6 in one season. So it's gonna be a big deal on the defensive side, trying to make sure that your pickoffs and tags are right there. Mondesi comes into play with that, with his shortstop play. We'll see if that can be something good for Boston as he plays in a very tough division in the AL East. Let's switch it on over and look over at what Kansas City is getting back, and that's Josh Taylor. 29 years old. I mean, before the injury last year in 2022, pretty effective. He struck out 60 in 47 and a half innings, only allowed 2 home runs in 2021. He's thrown some couple bullpen sessions so far this season, expects to be healthy in time for spring training. We'll see if that's the case. But what I find very interesting about this, Sean, is that we are seeing a young team build up offensively with the core of Kansas City. We talk about Bobby Witt Jr., we talk about Prado, we talk about Vinny Pasquantino. But this bullpen, they're building it with this interesting veteranship. They bring in Josh Taylor in a trade. They signed Aroldis Chapman, recently signed a 1-year, $3.25 billion deal. Amir Garrett's still there. You could also maybe put Angel Zerpa, another left-hander Royal player in the bullpen. This bullpen's pretty interesting. I would say very, very low floor, but very, very high ceiling. I think it could go either way. It could be super cold, super hot. I don't know if we're going to have whenever the microwave's working for Kansas City. I think we'll see what happens in this one. However, I find it very interesting. A team like Kansas City is building from the bullpen with veterans, young guys at offense. It's an interesting tactic that we're not seeing many other teams do.
Yeah, and I can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, the Kansas City Royals are looking around watching the cost of bullpen arms and looking around at the league and the trades that are being made and the signings that are happening, going, you know what? If we can just kind of catch lightning in a bottle, we may be able to benefit from this too, even though we're not in contention. Maybe, just maybe, this could help us in July. And I can't help but think that, and I'm not suggesting by any means that that's exactly why the Royals have signed Aroldis Chapman and now traded for Josh Taylor. I just, for some reason, it's in the back of my head though. Like, why else would the Kansas City Royals, as you say, be putting that kind of effort into a bullpen? Because you would think, if it were the other way around and it were a top contending team, bullpen pieces are kind of the finishing touches. They tend to be anyway. So that is an interesting development. And I don't know what the actual answer is, obviously, but it'll be interesting to see if that's just what it is. They're looking around saying we can develop some assets or collect some assets to maybe help us down the road. Maybe that's it, but it'll be interesting to find out.
Yeah, I mean, this could be an easy way for them to flip assets at the deadline, keep building that farm system even more, already have a young core building up within the system. We're starting to see them in the pros, the first wave, if you will. I like to talk about first waves with prospects coming. We really are seeing it right now at Baltimore. I can speak the same thing about Kansas City because we're truly seeing the first wave of those teams as well. They're about the same path when it comes to age on those. But I don't think Kansas City's done, because we've heard a lot about them this offseason making some trades, honestly, quite lately. We just heard another deal that was just done earlier in the week. They traded center fielder Michael A. Taylor over to the Twins. The Twins are not stopping. They're super busy. So I think there's still some possibilities that the Royals could not be done moving with some players as well. Utility man Hunter Dozier's been in conversations. He's owed $17 million over the next 2 seasons. So with that being said, I don't know if the Royals want to keep a utility man with that much money when they're building a core. And then Nicky Lopez, he's had a great season in 2021. He had a WAR of over 2. I'm sure they'd love to keep him, but if they could find some good value, again, talking about that expansive new how franchises want to spend all those assets on those 2 middle infielders. Nicky Lopez could be one of those guys the Royals chase after, or teams chase over for the Royals. And I mean, if you're the Royals, how can you not listen? So I think that's exactly where they're at right now. You obviously pay attention to see if they are going to make some more moves. I wouldn't doubt that the team that we're looking at right now of Kansas City, when you look at FanGraphs or depth chart, whatever you want to say, it's not going to be the same roster we see on opening day. I think there's going to be a couple more moves. I'm going to go ahead and predict that now.
Yeah, and I don't think you'd be that far off. I think if you've got a group like they have with the youth and the talent and all of that stuff, I don't think there's anything crazy about anything you're saying. I mean, obviously their starting rotation is going to have to, turn things around and be more dependable. But I think what you're seeing really comes down to them looking ahead for a couple of years, right? Maybe 2 years from now at just how good and competitive they are going to be. But you got to start somewhere. And I think maybe this is the start of that process. They feel like they have a good core group of young guys with a lot of talent. And maybe, just maybe, this is the start of them kind of like mapping out where their window is and working toward that.
I think it's interesting, regardless whether the case. As for Boston, we talk about adding in Mondesi. I don't think that they're done yet either. I think they still need to make a couple more moves. You lost Bogarts. You did re-sign Devers. That's something we knew they absolutely had to do. Mondesi comes in. Trevor Story is hurt. They feel like they still need to add maybe another infielder or at least start to look at some more depth pieces before the spring starts. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think the Red Sox have to do something. I mean, if you're the Boston fan of the Boston Red Sox, you're not going to just be like satisfied with Mondesi as your big acquisition, right? I think you're not going to abide losing for very long. So if you're the Boston Red Sox, I think you got to be doing something. You have to be kind of at least showing your fans that you're trying to put a decent product on the field, even if you're not expected to win. I think Boston, in my experience, fans of the Red Sox know baseball well enough to know that maybe we're not going to win the division, but we'd still not to like be embarrassed by coming to the stadium every night. So I think that's the balance that is the reality in Boston. So you're going to see them do something. You're going to see them stay active because I don't think they really have a choice. It's one of those fan bases that kind of demands it, right?
Yep, absolutely. Completely agree. And I don't think they will be happy with being at the basement of the AL East.
No.
Although right now I think they are projected to do so. I mean, one more thing on Mondesi here. I mean, elite speed. I think he is set to be the everyday shortstop right now if the season started today. In 2018 and 2019, in the seasons I was talking about, where Kansas City really thought that this guy was going to be like the next big thing, and they will carry him with them in this rebuild. I mean, he stole 75 bases between those 2 years. I mean, that's just absolutely insane when you're touching, averaging over 30 in 2 years straight. So the projections that you're saying with a 30 stolen base season, especially with bigger bases, not surprised by any means. I like this pickup, and so does Fangraphs. You look at their depth chart right now. He's projecting to be a 1.7 WAR player. That is a full 1 point above who was Enrique Hernandez, who was supposed to take over at shortstop before this trade happened after the Trevor Story injury. Hernandez played center field for the Red Sox over the past few seasons, but has played shortstop in 100 career games in the MLB. Now, Mondesi's played a lot of his games at shortstop. He's also dabbled at second, third base, but I think Mondesi is going to be your shortstop of the future, or at least for this season. I don't know about the future, but at least for this season, he's got 1 year left before free agency. Worst case scenario, Red Sox fans, you traded Josh Taylor for a rental to cover for Trevor Story's injury. I mean, that's the worst case scenario you're getting, but you're getting elite speed. You're getting pretty great defense in where defense is a premium right now, especially in those middle infielder spots. So I think this is a great trade by both teams. It seems like Kansas City was ready to move on from this team. They have a strategy. They're sticking to it. Keep young guys in the bats and start trading for veteran bullpen. Hey, who knows? Maybe that's going to be a premium trade, just like you mentioned. We saw in the trade deadline last year, Jorge Lopez from Baltimore to the Twins. That's something that obviously reminds me of how much of a premium that was. So I do like this pickup. I think this is a really good trade for both teams, but I'm really pointing towards the benefits towards Boston.
Yeah, and the last thing I would add to that is that they just signed Adam Duvall as well, and so that adds an outfielder to the mix, and it kind of allows Hernandez to be that utility guy where he thrives. Right, he can play anywhere, and I think that helps the Red Sox. I guess they've added by putting one guy in the set position of shortstop, they've kind of increased their overall versatility by allowing Hernandez the freedom to be able to play in multiple different spots, right? So I think that too, the versatility is something that the Boston Red Sox will come to enjoy if it wasn't already part of the plan, which I think it might have been.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us with this episode, this nice bonus episode of the OK Baseball podcast. Mondesi is now a Boston Red Sox. Josh Taylor over to the Kansas City Royals. Interesting times here in the offseason season. We have you covered here at OBP. Take care.